All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the main event, the reason you are all here to preach for you once again. Please give it up for Pastor Steve Williams.
This is those lights. Anyway, it's so good to see those who I can see, so many of you here and so many familiar faces. Violet, I love the joke, but don't split on me, will you? Yeah. I just want to say it does feel like home, and it feels good to be back home. To come in and hang out with you for a little while before we came upstairs was just a real blessing for me, and it did. It just felt like home. We were here for a long time, and I remember particularly this room. It had been one time the bell room, and the bells were fighting us about moving the bells down to their own storage area. It was a long fight because they'd always been here, and it just seemed like I'd always been in fights all the time. You know, we were going to make it easier. They didn't have to carry the bells all the way downstairs and all that. They'd be right there. They'd set up. And no, we like it here, and this is the way it's always been. But anyway, it's just like home. And so it does feel like home for me. And I just want to say, for me to be up here too, this was one of the first places we began. There was a wall that divided this space somehow, and we tore it down and actually doubled the size of this room so that we had enough room for all of you. And that makes me feel real good to see that we had room for you. This evening, I was kind of given the assignment to be prepared for my last sermon. And I don't know, Matt, was that some kind of premonition that you think I'm going to die between here and such? But that lastness kind of bothers me. It's so final-like. And so I started thinking about what would I do in my last sermon. I looked to Jesus. I usually do when I get ready for my sermon. But when Jesus gathers in the upper room and has, breaks together the Passover meal and such, they often call it the Last Supper. And I think, why do they call it the Last Supper when really it wasn't the Last Supper? It was the Lord's Supper, and it was really the first supper, but they call it the Last Supper. I like what the pastors, what Scott and Matt are doing, and I have to say thank you for letting me come back. That's rare a pastor can come back to their old church, but they're doing something, you save the best for last. Is that what the theme is for Lent? Yep. Yeah, really. He saved the best for last. And so the best part of this is it's one of my favorites, and it's the 14th chapter of John, and I'll get into it to share why it's important to me. He begins by saying to the disciples, says after they've had their meal, and he's giving this kind of message of comfort and strength. He knows full well that what's lying before him is a cross, and he's giving these words to them in preparation for his betrayal and his arrest and his crucifixion. He says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many, many dwelling places. Were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. In some versions it says, in my Father's house are many, many rooms. And I found it was interesting as Jesus was gathered there with his disciples. They had been through a lot in the 3 years together. And Jesus himself says, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head at night. And so for him, it was interesting for me that they were itinerant. They just traveled from here to there and maybe staying with Lazarus and his sisters for a while, but mostly they had no place to call home. And yet he gave us this understanding that where God lives, there's this wonderful home with lots of room. Lots of room. For me, there's something symbolic about a home, and especially after living in parsonages for 40 years of finally finally having our own place, and I don't have to call the trustees permission to put a nail in the wall to hang a picture anymore. I do have to talk to Janet first and make sure it's in the right thing. But it's just a feeling. And our concern was, is it big enough for our family? Because that was one of the top priorities for me, was having a home large enough so that they could all come home. Home. In my lifetime, before I even got called in ministry, there were times in my life I felt as if God was tapping on my shoulder, saying, I have something special for you to do. There's something, Steve, I would like you to do. And it just seemed to happen every step of the way. This week is a week that they've been remembering. It's not a thing that we'd want to celebrate, but mostly Sunday, there was a gathering of people in Selma, Alabama, where they were talking about Bloody Sunday. It was in the midst of the civil rights movement, and the black folks of the South were asking just the ability to be able to vote. And so they walked from Selma to Montgomery, and on the way they were stopped at a bridge and beaten up brutally by the people that you would hope that would protect you, the police and the sheriff's department. And it's just a horrible thing that was going on at the same time I was in junior high school. So we talked some about all that had happened and all that had occurred. And you saw it on television, and it was mind-blowing how hateful and spiteful and mean that we could be to those we consider our brothers and sisters. A year later, I'm going to school in Des Moines, at Franklin Junior High School, on the west side of Des Moines, and Des Moines decided that they were going to integrate the schools. Decided that they were going to integrate the kids from the inner city and bring them out to the west and the east sides and integrate them into the school, the black children. Our parents got letters informing us that when it would begin and what would be happening, and basically what the letter was we want to let you know, and we hope that nothing bad happens. We hope that nothing bad happens. This is a year after what had happened in Selma. You know, there were all kinds of those kinds of horrible things happening to black people who were just peacefully demonstrating, asking for their own rights. We talked about it in school, and then my parents got a second letter from Mr. Bowen, the vice principal of Franklin Junior High. Mr. Bowen was the disciplinarian. If you got in trouble, they sent you to the vice principal, and he took care of it. So when it was sitting there, my dad and mom called me to the living room and wanted to read it to me and such. I was just about, I just about lost every potty training I had learned. Because the name Bowen and my folks having something from him was scary. But as my dad began to read this letter, he began to choke up. He said, Mr. and Mrs. Williams. And basically, I can't recall exactly, but we have chosen Steve, the teachers and the staff, to be part of the team that will welcome the black students that would be coming to Franklin Junior High. And it was a letter asking for permission for me to be able to do that. So my dad choked up. A letter saying that their son was exceptional. I was feeling pretty good. But to feel as though there was something I could do, and if you'd known me when I was 13 years old, I was squirrely as ever. I was still playing with what are the steel things with nuts and bolts and erector sets. I moved beyond Legos to erector sets. I was into model cars and slot cars. Boys were all I hung out with. Girls were from another planet. And so to be asked to do that, my dad choked up, thinking that this was going to be good for me and also he was so proud and asked me, is this something that I would like to do? And being a 13-year-old said, well, I guess so. But the day came when we got called down to Mr. Bowen's office, and we all went to the library. Those of us who were going to greet, I knew some of the kids I didn't know, but we got to know each other. And we talked about what the day was going to be like when the black students rolled up in the buses and what they were going to be meeting on the way there, to be prepared. And to be prepared for the students, but also to be there for them. He said, I do remember him saying that they are exceptional students. We are not worried about what they will be doing in the classroom. They have been chosen just like you by the teachers and the staff of the school as being kids that can come and be a part of this trial. That's what they called it. And just like you, we think you're exceptional as well. And we think you're the ones here to be their friends. We want you to make them feel at home. Want you to make them feel like they are home. Home. The day that they arrived, we met them at the bus. I had a name tag on, and I also had Sam's name tag on. Basically, we were paired together because he would be going through every one of the classes that I was in. I would be sitting next to him in the next desk. And one of the instructions as we met is that we were to even be with him through the halls and even to stand in the bathroom because they were afraid that something would happen after they arrived. I thought going through the hallway was like going through a gauntlet. This is my school, and I'm supposed to try to make them feel at home when I myself was being targeted because I was with Sam. The punches, the catcalls, the pushes, the knocking out of the books in my hands, but even more so for Sam. And yet, we were reminded to remain calm, pursue and walk forward, and don't cause any problems. To stand at the bathroom and wait and making sure that they were safe. Sam was safe. It's hard to believe that 55 years ago that was life. And our job was to make them feel at home. To make them feel at home. Later in life, I graduated and started working on an engineering degree at Iowa State. My junior year, I hit the wall. I hit the wall in the sense that I had put so much effort in keeping up my grades and studying and wanting to succeed that I just had burnt myself out. And inside me was this emptiness that there has to be more to this than just making the grade and passing the classes. And so one Sunday, I decided I would go try church again. It was one of those, and I hate to confess that when I went to college, Mom and Dad weren't there to get me up and going on Sunday mornings to go to church, so I would sleep in. So I found myself in the back row of the Collegiate United Methodist Church. I snuck in, got myself as far away from the pulpit as I possibly could, sat in the back row, but what I didn't realize is that there was a little plaque on each of the pews that said, "Reserved for families with small children." And before I know it, I thought that maybe I had sat next to the Osbornes and whatever family's got, what was that family, John Boy and all that, the Waltons. There was no way I could sneak out, get out, or anything. I was literally trapped at Collegiate United Methodist Church. I sat there and Went through the service. I couldn't tell you exactly what was said by the pastor. But as I was trying to leave, it seemed like this was a family reunion between the two families, and there was no way I could even get around them to get out, as they all came together and I'm in the middle. When there was a woman by the name of Dorothea Ginger. Dorothea had come back there and was on her way out and saw me and said, "You look new here. I'm Dorothea and this is Lou, and would you like us to take you for lunch?" I thought, wow, that's an invitation to get out of this pew. And I went, and Dorothea and Lou took me out for lunch. And lo and behold, that afternoon I received a call from the Wesley Foundation campus minister, Gary Putnam. And then later on that week, I had two visitors. One of them was Bob Dean, who is one of my best friends as a pastor also in the conference. And they invited me to come back, invited me to be part of the Wesley Foundation. And then things started opening up and things started to make sense. I felt a call to the ministry, and from there I began to test it and then confirm it, and then led to 40 years of serving churches in Iowa. A year ago, I was called to serve at Collegiate United Methodist Church, the very church that I started in. The church had basically blown up, and they were asking me to try to keep it afloat. So I thought I was retired. They said, well, just be for 30 days. Well, they kept adding 30 days. And so as I thought about the first Sunday I would be standing in the pulpit, I'm going to have to do something to prove to them that I'm worthy of the task of being there, of being their pastor and trying to help them wade through all that they were dealing with. And so I told them. My story actually begins in the back pew of this congregation, of hitting the wall when I was in my junior year at Iowa State and trying to find my way. I had InterVarsity and Campus Crusade and Campus Baptist with all of the answers that I needed, but there was something more I wanted, and I ended up there. And then I could stand right here at their sanctuary, but I know I would not be standing here and have served 40 years in the Iowa Annual Conference if I hadn't ended up in your back pew. For me, this is like coming home. For me, this is like coming home. The next Sunday, as I arrived, I'm up in the pulpit area, just getting stuff ready, get back, and then I come back in, and there is this sign. I don't know if you got this sign in the pulpit area that says, "Welcome home, Steve." Welcome home, Steve. That was in the sanctuary. And evidently I made an impression that they were glad to have me back home. This evening, as we talk, I just want us to realize that this is God's home, and it is our responsibility as a church to welcome people in, to make them feel welcome. There should be no reason that we tell someone that they are not welcome. I've experienced the worst of life in the brutality and the hate that people have shown to people of different races. I've experienced it even in the churches I've served, but we didn't want that kind to be attending here. But right now, our denomination's at a point that we need to decide if we are going to welcome anyone and all. When I served here, one of the key phrases we often use is when we say all, we mean all. What I appreciate about Scott and Matt is they've continued to carry the ball even farther. For us to understand that when we mean all, it means all. And you define what all is. Because we want them to feel welcome. We want them to come here. I find it interesting that when Jesus was facing the cross and he was gathered around with his disciples around the table for the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, there was still room at the place in that table for Judas, the one who was ready to betray him, that would lead to his arrest, the one then that would lead to then his crucifixion. You would think there would be the greater sin. Yet we tell people that they are unwelcome. I find it interesting that when the disciples asked Jesus, "How do you teach us to pray?" and they taught him he taught him the Lord's Prayer, which basically says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And our efforts is to make earth like heaven, a place where all are loved. Very close to the same paragraph ahead of this, Jesus says, "I'll give you one last commandment, that is to love one another as I have loved you." So tonight, I want to say thank you. Thank you for making this home for us. Thank you for inviting me to come back home. Thank you for your efforts to make this home a place for all who come and enter their doors, no matter who they are. Because this is God's home, and we want everyone to feel welcome. Let us pray. Gracious and holy God, we thank you for the opportunities that we have to witness to our faith and to share your love. We ask, O Lord, that in that your light might shine, and all the good that we do reflects on your love for the whole world. So bless us and guide us in all that we do, that we might make this a home where all feel warm, welcome, comforted, and loved. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Pastor Steve Williams.
You did give me some feedback.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight to come hear Pastor Steve preach for us one more time. And I ask that as you leave tonight and as you go about your week and as you go about your daily routines, you take the message that Pastor Steve has given us tonight about what it means to feel at home and what it means to make others feel at home. The United Methodist Church is in the middle of some strife. We all know what that's about. We've spent a lot of time talking about it, and it's my hope that you take what Steve has said to heart about what he's experienced, what he has seen, and what we're seeing right now. Whatever preference you have about what your church looks like, how it operates, what music it has, who it lets in the doors, I hope you're able to let go of that preference. And instead, what you're able to do is focus on the purpose of this church. And the purpose of this church is to be home for every single child of God, every single brother and sister that walks this earth, whether they've accepted Christianity at this stage in their life or not, wherever they are. This is their home. That is our purpose. That is our calling. So let this be home for everybody. So go forth this week. Have a great week. And please, please, please be Christ for one another. Have a great night.
Oh my gosh. We need a secure booth.
Oh, it's good to be back.